A professor once told me that if you have something to say, yet you refuse to say it, you're just doing a disservice to the people who are willing to listen. And I think right now, truer words have never been spoken. I've worked in the service industry for almost 10 years now, and it was never something that I thought was going to be this career goal or this, ultimate path. It was something I sort of just did to pay the bills as I went through college. But it's funny how life sometimes you go into something and these things that seem insignificant to start end up being this launching pad for something much bigger. And that's sort of what the service industry was for me. But more specifically, that's sort of what happened when I started working at Homestead.
I tell this story every time, but this is a dish that Liz really wanted on the menu that I disagreed with, and we argued and argued and argued, and one day she put it on the menu without talking to me, and it was one of the best dishes I had ever had. And it still is to this day, so it's become a classic.
I'm Liz, this is my husband Fred.
I am part owner of Homestead Restaurant.
With me, his wife. Can't do it. Homestead opened in August of 2013. We had been working in San Francisco, living in San Francisco for a number of years. We saw Oakland as a great opportunity. As well, the nature of our business model and our business plan is it's community-oriented. It isn't a tourist destination.
From a cooking standpoint, we've always worked in restaurants where you're a seafood restaurant and we don't serve porterhouses, or we're an Italian restaurant, we don't do French food. And we wanted to create an experience where we could do whatever the hell we wanted.
We change the menu almost every day. Depends on what we have, what the farmers have.
They ask us, what do we want to serve in the restaurant? What can they grow for us? And that's pretty common in the farm-to-table industry. And you can't do that with a large vendor, You don't have that same relationship.
We chose to do farm-to-table because for us, cooking is an expression of ourselves. We don't want to cook the same thing every day. We want to kind of evolve and change. And what excites me is the idea of taking an ingredient that's at the peak of its season and turning it into a sauce that is the best sauce that you can make that time of year.
From Tuesday to Saturday, we open up at 5 p.m. and we have a regular menu where you have more choices. On Sundays, we do have our Sunday supper. Sunday supper is going to be a prefix menu, and we try to change it every single Sunday.
My favorite day to work is Sunday. We get to sit down at the end of the night and have a staff meal.
Sunday supper staff meal is the best because we all sit down, we all eat what's on the menu.
It's very relaxed. It gets all departments of the restaurant together in one place to break bread, share stories. I think there's a lot of things that, words can't describe about the importance of situations like that.
I moved to the Bay Area back in 2014. I was going out there to go to college. I didn't really have much of a plan. I just knew I wanted to go get my degree in cinema there. So, I never even been to Oakland or the Bay Area, but there was something in me that just said that I needed to be there. So I packed up my car and I sort of took this leap of faith and drove down there and thought, hey, what's the worst that can happen? And about a month in, I still didn't have a job. I remember there was one day after, spending the day handing out resumes, I get home and I just sort of break down and I'm crying and I'm like praying and I'm just thinking, I need a job, I need a job, I need a job. The very next day, I get a phone call and this guy's on the phone and he says his name's Fred Sasson, he's from Homestead Restaurant. He saw me come in and fill out an application and he wanted to give me a job.
Cassidy came to us and applied to be a server. She did not have a ton of experience at the time, but she kept showing up. She showed up for 3 days in a row and said, this is where I want to work, this is the company I want to work for.
He wanted to offer me a job as a reservationist. And he had already had a reservationist, so he could only offer me like 2 days a week. And it was definitely not enough hours, but I figured, I don't know, there's something about this restaurant that I like, and I'm gonna give it a shot and, you know, see what comes of it. It was one of the best decisions that I ever made.
Oakland is a very special town. There is a wealth of different types of people here that love food, they love community, they support us. The fact that we can come together, break bread, share experiences, create new experiences, and be there for each other. I haven't really seen that in other cities I've lived in.
You know, the food is very innovative. It's very straightforward at the same time. Fred and Liz, they're able to keep a very consistent quality night after night.
We're good friends as well. Sometimes I think of Homestead as our second home, and we're always welcomed here.
I feel connected here. I feel like this is sort of my home away from home. Not to be too cheesy about it, but it is my homestead away from my homestead.
It's where our family coexists, you know. It's where I get to spend time with my husband, as we're both working so many hours and so many days. We don't get a lot of free time outside of the restaurant together. We've made a lot of friends through this restaurant, so Homestead to me is our home.
I feel like restaurants are like families. It's a good support system to have. That's one of the reasons I chose to work here, is because I could tell it was like a family.
The idea of Homestead that really drew me to it was I was pitched on that every week 30% of the customers coming in are regulars or return customers, which is kind of unheard of in a lot of different restaurants.
It's really surprising, especially because of the prices and how small this restaurant is. But I think it's because when you walk here, it's not like you're in a restaurant. It's like you're going to your cousin's house or something. Everybody knows everybody, and the servers and the kitchen people and Fred and Liz treats you like your family.
For me, being a small business owner is kind of the American dream. It's the idea that you can, through hard work and through innovation and initiative, you can kind of take your destiny into yourself, and you can go out and you can forge your own path, be your own boss, create your own community, make your own culture, and really kind of thrive within that.
Where you work, the culture infests your life culture. The business operation, that's not cut out for everybody, so you can't just be a really great cook and then operate a restaurant without a quality team. Any restaurants that just have a very nice white linen tablecloth environment and charge way too much for a piece of steak that's tough, they're not gonna last.
It's just awesome to see a local business doing the damn thing. Probably can't say that.
The list is endless for being a small business owner. You will get pulled away by a customer for an hour-long conversation about something. And you know, you have to be able to engage your customers, even if it's just like shooting the breeze. That's part of it. Or, you know, your grease trap will overflow and you have to spend an hour and a half not just cleaning it, but getting rid of the smell in the restaurant, going home and showering because it is disgusting.
Okay, we can't talk, let's not talk about that.
Okay.
You just have to be prepared to do anything. I try not to schedule myself for anything, but yet every day I'm fully booked and busy.
There's a lot of things that you can inadvertently do wrong, even with the best intentions. So it's still very important to keep yourself up to date, to ensure that you're complying, to ensure that no one's taking advantage of you.
Anytime you have a business, you have a bullseye on you, I say. So you have a duty to make sure, and it behooves you to make sure that you're following the law. There's so much backlash that can come from not following the laws, and there's so many laws that apply in the workplace.
Laws are constantly being tinkered with. Verbiage is being tightened or made more specific every day on a massive number of laws that nobody tells you about.
So I think for a while, working at Homestead was just a job. It wasn't until Measure FF got voted into law that I felt a switch. And I felt like there was something a little bit more. In November of 2014, Oakland voted on Measure FF. And Measure FF was a voter initiative that was promoted by a group called Lift Up Oakland. The measure would raise minimum wage from around $9 an hour to $12.25, effective March 2015. It also stipulated that there would be a yearly adjustment for inflation, and then built into that law was other bylaws of what employers had to offer to employees as far as sick leave, pay, and then there was some specifics about the way that tips could be distributed within a restaurant system. And as a community, it had a lot of support.
Oakland's a voter initiative city, and what a voter initiative is an initiative that is written by an individual that can get canvassed by people on the sidewalk, and if they get enough signatures, it can go on the ballot, and if it gets voted on and in favor of, then it is required to be passed and implemented as written by the individual. The voter initiative, I think, has a very awesome presence in terms of democracy and being able to hear the people's voices, but I also feel like it's really easy to kind of skew and present the policies on the street in a way in which the person voting isn't really understanding the full consequences or ramifications of what it is that they're voting for.
I think the largest issue with voter initiatives is that they're myopic in nature, right? They usually don't look at the big picture. So when you're voting on something, generally people voting are not going to educate themselves on the other things that that might affect, or read in how that affects other businesses, how it may affect them in another way that they're not thinking of. Sometimes our legislature or people who write laws are not attorneys or they're not judges, so they don't know how statutes are constructed. So there's definitely issues that come with the ways votes are written, and that unfortunately continues to this day.
Because this went through voter initiative, most people didn't read the fine print. All they heard was higher minimum wage and they voted yes, so it passed overwhelmingly. But the consequences of the bylines have proven to be far more inhibitive to growth of business.
So I think to really understand the complexity of all of this, we have to understand that there are different definitions of what a small business is. There is a federal definition of what a small business is, a state definition, and then there are local definitions.
Federal laws basically build a foundation upon which state and local laws can put the ceiling. State and localities can never go beneath the floor that the federal law set, but they can definitely extend more rights. So you have to be aware of what the foundation is, and you definitely have to be aware of what other laws apply to you. So you have to be aware of all of the laws.
At the end of the day, a small business has to uphold the strictest version of the law. Even if the federal law states that a big business is defined as 500 people with $1.2 million in revenue, if in California it's 50 people or less, they can't say, well, federally I'm okay. Locally they're not. With Measure FF, a small business is defined as 10 people or less of any type of employment on average per month. So essentially that makes almost every business in the Bay Area a large business, which is insane.
A lot of times these minimum wage laws are much more detrimental to small business owners. They just simply don't have the funds, the overhead to shoulder these changes as quickly as they're coming out.
Within legislation, there are different standards for small businesses than there are for big businesses, and that's purposely built into the laws to give smaller businesses a leg up. But if every business is practically considered a large business, that doesn't even help.
So I know when we were presented with Measure FF, when we talked to certain restaurant owners, some knew about it, some had no idea. My gut reaction, purely just from the minimum wage standpoint, was fear. I mean, on the one hand, it sounds really great, but knowing our industry and how our employees were paid, it seemed like a death sentence.
The immediate response is you have to raise prices, because there isn't just, a 40% surplus of funds laying around, so that was a given to fund this.
It highlighted a disconnect between government and community, in that the community could come together, put this bill on the ballot, but that the government gave no pathway to implementation. They discussed nothing with any small business owners about how this would affect them. It highlighted, initially the challenges of minimum wage rising, but it highlighted a whole host of other problems within the Oakland community, and I'm sure they're prevalent across the nation.
So I voted for Measure FF. I kind of looked into the laws, but not really too much. And I remember looking at Measure FF and thinking, okay, minimum wage law. I'm making close to minimum wage. I could use a raise, and if it's gonna help people, why not? But I didn't know what that meant.
I think that there's a lot of focus on minimum wages in our culture right now, and has been that interest for decades, because it seems a natural way to help others not be impoverished. Most of us trade our time for money. It seems natural that if we put a floor on how much money we get for our time, that would make everyone better off. But I think that the imposition of minimum wages can lead to consequences that are hard to think of from the beginning, that are hard to measure. And so that's really where the trickiness of the issue starts to raise its head.
The history of the minimum wage right up until the last year or two in the United States, for the last 30 or 40 years, has been of relatively small, fairly frequent increases, often phased in over a few years. It's really important to point out that the kinds of minimum wages that we're seeing proposed right now or even enacted are really far outside of our historical experience. It's one thing to go from $7.25 to $8.50 an hour, maybe a 20% increase. It's not nothing, but it's not enormous. But going from $7.25 to $15 an hour is more than double. And it's uncertain the size of the effects, but all the uncertainty runs in one direction. How bad will it be? How many jobs will be lost? Because it's very clear that when the price of something goes up, people purchase less of it. And that's true for commodities, and it's true for low-skilled labor. When the price of low-skilled labor goes up, that higher wage bill has to be paid by somebody. So it can be paid by owners through lower profits, it can be paid by consumers through higher prices, and it can be paid by employees. Not necessarily through lost jobs, though that's a distinct possibility, but through reductions in hours, reductions in benefits, reductions in flexibility, reductions in opportunities. But somebody has to pay this higher wage bill. And it's really not clear who's going to pay it if you're increasing the minimum wage by $7, $8 an hour.
So every year the U.S. Department of Labor puts out a list of the 10 lowest paying jobs, and every year the lowest 7 of the 10 are all in one industry, the restaurant industry. The industry is now the nation's second largest and absolute fastest growing private sector employer, with over 13 million workers nationally. 1 in 11 American workers currently works in restaurants. 1 in 2 Americans has worked in the industry at some point in their lifetime. And yet, despite the industry's size and its growth, it continues to be the absolute bottom of the barrel lowest paying employer in the United States. So raising their wages is essential both for back of house and front of house.
The anti-minimum wage argument is an economics argument. And it's the argument that you can't just give somebody more money because you want to. It really goes against the foundation of economic thinking, and that's that there is this cause and effect that happens, and labor is a resource. And if you're going to give somebody more for a resource without actually getting more out of it, that's counterintuitive.
The University of Washington recently did a study of the minimum wage increase that occurred here in Seattle and how that affected the restaurant industry. And what they found is that while the wage rate for restaurant workers actually increased, the number of hours that they worked actually decreased a little bit more, such that at the end of the day, they came out with a little bit less money. This is one of these unintended consequences that nobody really thought to include in the legislation that would raise the actual wages.
As the minimum wage rises, the barrier to entry for the minimum wage rises with it, which excludes a lot of people who maybe don't have the skill set, yet they'll never get the opportunity to learn that skill set in a real world experience. And that's one of the most disheartening things to me about this, is the opportunity cost to that individual. And so while there's people in the past that I would have taken a chance on, I would have hired 2 dishwashers and when I only needed 1, and let them kind of work together and grow. But now I don't have a choice. I can't afford 2 dishwashers at this rate. And the 1 dishwasher I need has to be able to carry a workload of 125%.
I think the way we talk about the minimum wage is really misguided. To me, the real question is, how do we alleviate poverty? How do we make sure that people have a minimum standard of living? Which means, how do we transfer resources from high-income households to low-income households? And how can we do that while preserving incentives to work and to hire? And the minimum wage does badly on both of those counts. The minimum wage is a blunt instrument. It doesn't differentiate between a teenager who's earning money during the summer for video games and a single mom with 3 kids who's just trying to keep things together. It treats both of those people the same. As for preserving incentives to work and hire, well, certainly people want to work more when their wages are higher, and that's a good thing. But it reduces the incentives of employers to hire those people because their cost has gone up. Whether those are large impacts or small impacts is an empirical question that economists love to argue about, but there's no question that when the price of something goes up, you purchase less of it. And so the minimum wage is just a very badly designed anti-poverty policy, and we should be looking for other ways to alleviate poverty rather than arguing back and forth over whether the minimum wage should be $7, $10, $12, $15, or $20 an hour. It's just the wrong question.
Flagstaff is targeted to have the highest minimum wage at $15.50 in the nation as we sit here today. And my job is to protect the financial livelihood of 120 employees, and that is paramount. And it's a freaky time.
Flagstaff has 75,000 people now. When I was growing up, I think there was closer to 30,000. It's always been a very close-knit community. It's always been a very diverse community. And I think that we just grew up that way. We have a lot of small businesses here. A lot of people who came here, they had an idea, they started it, and they're moving it forward.
The reason I started a business in Flagstaff is I thought I could provide, and I have been able to provide something new to the community. 31 years ago, we started a little taco shop called Salsa Brava, and that has evolved into a full-service, casual family Mexican restaurant. We have a very broad demographic, and the same can be said about Fat Olives, where we are today. It's a very traditional Neapolitan pizza. It's primarily wood-fired. There was none of it in town when I opened up. It too is a casual family restaurant. It's really approachable from a financial standpoint. People in Flagstaff want a lot of food for a lot of value, and I want to be the person to bring that to them.
In November of 2016, there was a minimum wage increase on the ballot. There was one that was a statewide minimum wage increase that would take the minimum wage in the state of Arizona to $12 an hour. There was a local one here in Flagstaff that would take the minimum wage to $15 an hour, with the understanding and the caveat that the minimum wage in Flagstaff would always be $2 more than the federal minimum wage or the state minimum wage. And both were passed.
That next day, businesses went for sale. Now, whether that was an unhealthy reaction or whether they were teetering already, I don't know, but at least a dozen restaurants here in Flagstaff within that week went on the market.
You have one side screaming, people need to get paid, they need to get paid fairly. You have the other side saying, we can't afford to pay what it is that people are asking.
When these initiatives came up, we had so many roundtables where we wanted to share our thoughts with the general public. And so many of us were branded as greedy business owners. A blacklist went out with 70 or 80 restaurants on that we were against paying people what they were worth, and it was a very scary time.
It was instantly kind of an us against them. Either you want people to stay poor or the business owners have all the money. It was that type of a thing. I think that was sad. And I think that was also very unusual for Flagstaff. I'm gonna say that because that's not Flagstaff. We've always been a tight-knit community. We've always been that community that's gonna come together and we're gonna work it out, we're gonna figure it out. And this was the first time I had seen that level of divisiveness ever.
The minimum wage discussion in Flagstaff is a very divisive issue. And I heard a lot of discussions happening using economic theory to try and justify an increase in minimum wage, and I knew that was wrong. I've never earned minimum wage, and I am not a small business owner, so in many ways, I have very little at stake, but I felt like I had an impartial opinion that would be meaningful to hopefully both sides of the discussion. Flagstaff has become a very expensive place to live. Trying to help people stay in Flagstaff that can't afford it, I think is something that sounds like a really nice thing to do. The reality is we just make it more and more expensive for everybody to live here, and we start losing entire portions of our demographic.
You know, this $15, or in our case, $15.50 minimum wage is being called a living wage. Let's dispel that rumor right now. It's already been determined that a living wage in Flagstaff is $22.50. So what we're dealing with is a higher minimum wage. So let's call it what it is. And I have to be okay with it. You know, I don't have a choice in this matter. So now it's, all right, let's manage this. How are we gonna do this? When all of this is all said and done, I'll be paying a 15, 16-year-old busser the equivalent of $32,000 a year. And yet, they're just building their work ethic. We did look at technology, and we've started to utilize a complete different POS terminal that allowed us to kind of downsize some areas, to eliminate a food server here or a food server there and make stations larger. And we've created changes in the kitchen that doesn't require as much prep. And we've consolidated some positions where we might have had 3 hosts on, we'll now have 2. Where we may have had 2 expos on, we'll have 1. But it certainly has affected our ability to employ and have as many people on the floor.
I really think that a $15 hour minimum wage was not the right thing for our community. I think that it did not address the issue of poverty in a way that makes it sustainable. And I think as it moves into $15.50, it's actually going to negatively impact the small businesses that we say we cherish so much in this community.
I've been in contact with a lot of small businesses and small restaurants in Flagstaff, and the truth is they're terrified, not only because of these new laws that are coming up that are going to really drastically change their businesses, but also to even voice their concerns about what that means for their businesses in general. I had one business owner tell me that they were so scared of the way that minimum wage conversation was happening in this country that they wouldn't say what was happening with their business because they were afraid that they would be boycotted. And so they were just gonna hold on, put their head down, and pick up the pieces at the end of it. And I'm just thinking, what if there's not any pieces to pick up?
We want to respect our employees. We want them to have the highest quality of life, no matter what. But we're in uncharted waters. It's a scary place to be, and we all don't have a plan yet. And that's what I hope the public understands, is that, you know, we're a huge industry, and we're kind of treading water with which way to take our business.
I don't blame any businesses for not choosing to speak up about this issue because they have to look out for their own livelihood and the livelihood of the people that they employ. I admire the businesses for being brave enough to just accept what the communities are choosing to pursue and trying to find a way to fix that, but in some ways that comes at a cost. This movement of people talking about minimum wage is not because they don't care. It's because there are issues that really need to be addressed, and we have to start educating ourselves about it because it's going to affect us if we don't.
I'm very concerned when we pass laws or when we vote on certain laws that we as people are not taking the time to review how those laws impact other laws or how they impact businesses or how they impact ourselves. We're not looking at laws in a holistic measure, or we're focusing on the trees and not seeing what the forest for what it is.
When Measure FF passed, it wasn't the initial change that was going to put us behind, but it was going to be the continual changes that came after that. And we were thinking, if we're already working this hard just to come even, just to keep our heads above water, and we make these adjustments and changes, which I think to their very core were needed, were wanted, were desired by the guests, myself, the staff alike, Just the how, I think, was a little bit more problematic. And as we projected 2 years out, 4 years out, 6 years out, we began to realize that there isn't that much of a path forward. We have to redefine who we are and what we're doing under these new conditions. I think all small businesses are set with their own challenges. Restaurants are a particularly difficult one. It is the only one that I really have experience with. So from my experience, it tends to be more of a lifestyle than a business.
There's a sense of urgency in a restaurant job that is definitely different than I would say to something like retail. There is this high-speed sort of manicness that comes with the restaurant industry.
It's like hosting a party all the time. And you have to clean, you have to cook, you have to make sure everyone's having a good time at all times. And most people know that it's really stressful when you host a party.
If you can't physically be present on the job, then you don't get paid. You're not there. You can't contribute. You can't like work from home as a bartender.
Working in a kitchen is stressful, like physically and mentally. I know a lot of cooks who just a couple months into the job, they're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore.
It's easy to get into because it's like an entry-level job and there's a lot of turnover. So you're kind of, if you need something quick, you can usually, hopefully find something.
I can see how it is a great stepping stone for people in different careers because you have to learn how to multitask, you have to learn how to just put up with people, which can be rough.
I think for a lot of people, it is a transitional kind of role. I know for me it was something I did while I was going to school, and but I earned a really good living doing it, and I loved it, and I was good at it, so I got a lot of satisfaction from it.
As a couples therapist, there are servers who make more money than I do. It's just interesting to know that I could potentially go back into the service industry and make more money than I do now, even though I'm working supposedly a very important job.
There's a skill that you really have to hone to be a server in a nicer restaurant. And Homestead was definitely a lot more intense than any other restaurant job that I ever had. It was the first time where I could see that working in a restaurant was not just something that could be temporary, that it could be this career path and it could be this place where people grow and learn and really find a passion for that.
In theory, Measure FF was raising the minimum wage, which is, in theory again, uplifting our lowest paid employees and giving them more income. In the restaurant industry, our lowest paid employees are our porters, dishwashers, bussers, and line cooks. Our employees who make minimum wage are servers. Servers make minimum wage plus tips. And so they're making 2 to 3 times as much money as the lowest paid employees in the restaurant.
Working for tips can be the greatest job in the world. It can also be the worst because you're constantly playing on what people view your worth at, regardless of the situations that you may or may not be able to control. Some nights you make more than a stockbroker. Some nights you make less than a panhandler.
I actually felt like working for tips was a great way to make a lot of money really fast.
I've always told myself, even when I'm done with school, I feel like I might still continue working as a server because it's good extra money, it really is.
It just has always amazed me how much more the servers have made than everywhere else, because I've been a server and I've watched and I've done the least amount of work and got paid the most, and I don't frankly understand it.
So you would get almost envious of the staff out front on a busy night because the servers would come through the window and be like, I just made $400, I just made $500. I was making $11 an hour on a 6-hour shift.
There's always been this like front of house versus back of house sort of like drama in the restaurant industry. I think purely due to the wage disparity.
Working at really big restaurants in San Francisco, you get to see that firsthand where the front of the house is making upwards of almost 6 figures a year, and the back of the house who has gone through professional training, who has gone through culinary school, who has dedicated their entire life to this craft and this career to make, cents on the dollar essentially. And it's kind of discouraging in that regard.
With all due respect to the level of work it takes for the production, there's also a mental component to customer service, which I do feel justifies at least a portion of that disparity, because having been behind the line and in front of the line, most times I would have been happy to just run back in the kitchen and hide and just make food, because I know I have to make the food for the customer, but I don't have to deal with the flack from the customer.
It doesn't have to be equal. It doesn't have to be equal outcomes. Just give us the opportunity. All I want is the opportunity to be able to earn a higher rate. That's it. I'll go prove my worth if I feel like the work is worth it. But that opportunity in a traditional tipping system doesn't exist.
A lot of people tried to push for tip credit, which is what other states do, where the pay is subsidized by the tip. So if you reach a certain point in your tip, they can cut out some of the minimum wage. They have a lower minimum wage.
We call it a tip penalty to workers, or a sub-minimum wage, or a loophole for employers to basically not have to pay their workers' wages.
I think that it kind of puts almost a threatening work environment on the server, because now they have to work really, really hard for tips, or else they're not going to get what they would elsewhere, or they're not going to be paid fairly, essentially.
When you have a tip credit restaurant, what ultimately ends up happening is that extra $8 that's not being paid to the server could be added to the kitchen employee's wage. So if minimum wage is $10 an hour, you could effectively pay that kitchen employee $18 and allow the server to go earn $18 an hour in gratuities, which is easily accomplished in most restaurants.
If you're in a fancy, your fancy cocktail bar and you're serving $16 drinks, the tip credit versus a non-tip credit isn't really as relevant to you, but if you're just getting by, if you're on the margins, it can make a huge difference, especially if your employer is looking to not pay you the minimum wage.
The mistakes in tracking the dollars are almost always made in favor of the restaurant owner and not on the worker. And so until the sub-minimum wage and the tip credit is eliminated, we're always going to experience this problem.
So there's several states in the country that are not tip credit states, which basically means that any tipped worker has to get paid minimum wage independent of whether they're making tips or not. And California is one of them.
When you require this guaranteed minimum wage across the board, no tip credits allowed, ultimately, the kitchen employees are the ones that are subsidizing the wages for the servers, which would be totally fine if the servers' tips help subsidize the kitchen. But it doesn't work like that. So what we all agreed on was, let's forget about the idea of minimum wage, and let's say that 83% of the population of Oakland voted to pay the lowest paid worker more money. How do we make this happen? And Liz and I's approach was to bring our management staff together and say, where is the win-win in this situation for all parties? And who is the parties affected by this law? Well, let's just say we kept it status quo. You have a server who's making minimum wage plus tips, which means that all servers get a raise. To afford their raise, we have to raise prices. Higher prices means that when they get a tip based on gratuity, that they're not only getting a raise hourly, but they're getting a raise in tips as well. Cooks already make above minimum wage. But now, because we have to pay all the servers this higher rate, cooks aren't going to get their raises this year. And not only that, but the cost of goods of everything else is going up around them. So they're losing big time. Managers are the people who make the restaurant operate. Well, now their employees just got a pay raise that's putting their rates above their salaries. And what's the incentive to step up and do more when you can come in, do less, and make more money? So the managers lose out. The guests have to foot the bill because we have to raise the prices. If we see a dip in cover counts because of higher prices, then we have diminishing returns and more expensive bills. So that's status quo.
If you just straight up raise your prices and do nothing else, your servers are getting 2 raises. You're still more challenged to raise your back of the house costs. So that just straight up raising prices contributes further to the disparity, makes it worse.
when a guest tips a server, they don't know if that server showed up on time to work. They don't know if that server is arguing or disrespecting the kitchen employees, but yet they're tasked with paying them and the business has no control over their compensation. No other business would tolerate that. So rather than having to deal with a tip credit and then this variable rate of tipping to make sure somebody gets taken care of or not, why don't we just get rid of both?
The concept of tip-free kind of just kept sort of bubbling up. No one else was interested in that at all. It was risky. You know, everyone says way too risky.
I've read a lot that in other countries, they don't do tips, so we shouldn't do tips here. But the tips are the foundation of the hospitality industry. I mean, that's just how we've always done business here. And businesses have been able to profit because they know that cost of paying that individual or that employee pool is partly shouldered by guests and people who are coming to eat at the restaurant or staying in hotels, etc. And employers know that, and they've been able to budget that over the years. So tipping is just part of American culture, and it's part of our economy.
I think tipping is a wonderful institution, and I know a lot of people disagree with me because it's a frustrating institution, but it solves what we call principal agent problems, which means that it helps to motivate servers, waiters, and waitresses who otherwise would not be monitored by the staff, and it also helps for the customer to signal their preferences and have those preferences be met. Second of all, it also allows the restaurant owners, as well as other service operators, to lower their cost and put some of the burden of what will be compensated for their employees on the customers. And customers could tip a lot, they might not be able to tip very much, but allowing that freedom allows some people who might not have a reserve high price that is very high, meaning that they don't want to spend a lot on this meal, to come in and still enjoy the meal. But other people who really enjoy it to be very beneficent and tip.
Somewhere in the last 20 years, we went from 15% to 20%, and people kind of picked up on that, and it was like kind of propagated throughout the country culturally, and it just sort of was accepted. But I also don't think that people are basing that understanding on the knowledge that there's this bifurcated wage and that people are actually paid $2.14 an hour, and then the tips make up that to get to the minimum wage.
Americans like the idea of tipping because they want to reward good service. And I'm for that. If you give somebody a fair, reliable wage and you want to tip on top of that, that's great. But you shouldn't, as customer, have to subsidize an employer. Your tip should be a gift. Thank you for doing this amazing job. But somehow it's become a subsidy to employers. And that's not what customers think it is.
People don't understand that by sitting at my table, you're actually taking away some money. So if you don't tip me a full 20% for the 2 hours that you sat there, you could actually end up hurting my night.
It's almost funny to think that somebody will just say, oh, I'll go wait tables real quick and make a couple bucks. But if you're not good at it, you don't make anything.
There was a joke within my restaurant that if somebody tipped you really, really well, it meant that you were a great server. If someone tipped you really, really horribly, it meant that they were a horrible tipper.
Granted, there are people that just say, oh my God, you were amazing. Like, I loved the experience, thank you. And you left with a menial tip. It's not that they're being discourteous, it's just that's how they show appreciation.
But I think we're at a point in a society where it's so ingrained that people just tip out of habit, even if their service was awful.
One of the more interesting things about the tipping norm is that people do feel obligated to tip what the norm is, and whether that's 15% or 20% now oftentimes get fairly murky. And we tend to tip almost automatically. It was something that our parents told us to do. Always leave that 15% because you don't know if that person is having a bad day or not. But in the case that there's really bad service or things just went horribly wrong, you can always deny the wait staff that tip. And I think that's the thing that really motivates servers to be on guard for. It's not so much that they're going to get an extraordinary tip, which may happen, but they want to make sure that they're not going to be denied a tip.
Today, 70% of tipped workers are actually women, Their median wage, including tips, is about $9 an hour. They struggle with 3 times the poverty rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce. They use food stamps at double the rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce. And they have literally and statistically the highest rates of sexual harassment of any industry. You have to put up with whatever the customer does to you, however they touch you or treat you or talk to you, because the customer's always right. The customer pays your bills, not your employer.
Is there or isn't there racism, sexism, and bias in tipping? If there's no tip, then it doesn't matter. That question mark doesn't exist anymore.
I've been to a place where at the end I'm like, oh, they're like, and they've told me, no, we don't accept tips. And I'm like, that's weird. But, okay. But to me, that means that everyone came in, everything was negotiated beforehand. Because then to me, that says that you're probably paying your employees proper money.
People can be on board with the underlying ideology of eliminating tipping, but that might work against your practical economic reality.
There was a restaurant in Seattle, not far from the University of Washington, that went tipless. They lost about 7% of their seatings and about 10% of their revenue, which is pretty significant with restaurants that run on pretty slim margins. And after 2 years with experimenting with this model, they decided, is it really worth it? Let's go back to the tipping model.
There has to be enough players buying in such that consumers recalibrate their expectations as to a meal's true cost. And at current, the majority of restaurants are partitioning their prices so that diners are undervaluing their meals. And if enough restaurants were to buy in, I do think that consumers might actually expect a plate of pasta to reflect the true cost of both ingredients and service.
I think I was the first tip-free restaurant in New York of a certain kind of restaurant. Super high-end restaurants, they didn't have any tips. And then there was sort of this small section of actually Japanese restaurants that have always been tip inclusive, but sort of in your mainstream restaurants, I was definitely the first tip-free one. So Dirt Candy is an all-vegetable restaurant, and when we opened it 10 years ago, people kept trying to sort of put us in the sort of what I call like the vegetarian ghetto. Yes, it's true we didn't have any meat on our menu, but that wasn't our focus. There was no politics or sort of ethos behind the restaurant. Our main goal was just to make vegetables taste really good. I would say that we are still probably the only restaurant, definitely in North America, I might go so far as to say anywhere in the world, that is truly dedicated only to vegetables. That is our mission. We want to prove to people that they are as exciting as meat, and most people don't miss it when they're here. New York is an incredibly competitive city. It's also incredibly expensive. The cost of living is higher than most cities in the States. And about 2 years before we were already in the process of building this space, before I opened it, I had put out an ad for a cook. And I couldn't find one. Like, nobody's responding to these ads, which was weird because 6 months beforehand and a year before that, I would put out an ad and we would get like hundreds of responses. But it got me thinking. I was like, well, this is gonna be really problematic. I'm opening a new restaurant and I need 15 more cooks. And if I can't even get one to apply here, how am I possibly gonna find cooks for this new restaurant? I was like, okay, so I need to figure out a way where I can pay my cooks enough money so they want to stay in New York City, they want to work here. And you know, there was no more money really that I could feasibly see that I could pull out of the restaurant without sort of not being able to have a restaurant anymore. And then I started looking around my restaurant and I looked at my server and I was like, well, that's really interesting. I only had one server. And there are some states where you can share the tips in the back of house. New York State is not one of them. The only people who are allowed the tips are on the tip credit. Because she was the only one who was allowed to take the tips, she was walking out every night with between $500 and $700. But my cook is taking home $150 or $170 a night, even though we were all helping her. I was the backup server, my dishwasher was basically her busser, my cook was also a part-time food runner. You're like, well, that's a huge discrepancy. How can I sort of narrow this gap a little? And I was like, wow, I'm never gonna be able to get around this. I can't break the system if I participate in the tipping system, because I'm never gonna be able to reasonably share all those tips with the back of house. It's against the law in New York City. I was like, yeah, let's just not do it. Let's pay everybody a reasonable wage. That way we can divvy up the money in the pot that we make, and we can give a little bit more of it to the back of house. The front of house can still take home a reasonable amount of money, and we'll start to balance out the system. So when we opened, actually, we were tip-free, but we had sort of separated it into an administrative fee. And that was straight 20%, and then that was all totaled up, and you were just meant to sign. The general feedback was, I don't really care that I don't have to tip, but why can't you just include it in the price? And we had made this conscious decision not to, because we didn't want to look too expensive. But people just couldn't wrap their heads around that it still wasn't a tip. All our reviews were like, really love the place, but that admin fee, why can't they just roll it into the price? And the reason we were able to have it was sort of in this gray area of the law. And then about 6 months into our being open, it became very clear that it was no longer in a gray part of the law. It was illegal. So we just rolled the tips in. And we spent a lot of time with our servers explaining to our customers what was going on. A lot of our reviews were like, whoa, too expensive, but glad, it's tip inclusive. And we would have a lot of discussions back and forth, and customers would call us over and be like, why are you doing this? Why can't I tip my server? And we would, have a lot of conversations. But we don't have to have those actually anymore. People, I think, are a lot more used to the idea of a tip-free restaurant. One of the things that we got a lot as, well, what if I get bad service? And I'd be like, okay, I could complain like you would do in any other industry. And they'd be like, yeah, but I like to show my complaints with my tips. I'd be like, well, what do you mean? That's their money. You can't take money away from somebody. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But here, people are like, well, wow, you want me to complain? You want me to say something? Yes, actually use your voice. Say you're not happy with the service, talk to the manager, and everybody in the restaurant will try to fix your experience for you, because all of us are here actually to serve you. That is our job. Then people are like, oh, well, I don't think my servers are gonna work very hard if they don't have tips. I'm like, well, they wouldn't have a job if they didn't wanna work hard. And if they weren't working hard, then I wouldn't employ them. Like, if they're not gonna work hard for me, then I'm probably not gonna keep them on my staff. So you don't have to worry about that. That's actually my job, because now I pay them. And sort of changing that mentality. So for me, my servers, they like to work. They want to work on Friday nights. They like to work hard. They like to feel that rush. I still want my servers to sell. So I haven't seen sort of any relaxing, and people are just like, oh, I'm only going to work Monday nights.
Amanda Cohen is just a leader in the industry. I go to a restaurant all the time because it's just the most amazing food with incredible service. She trains her people so well.
Her very outspoken and successful implementation of the tip-free policy has been a huge inspiration. And I think the fact that it's worked for, her restaurant was so small, and then she also was able to make it work for a restaurant that was able to seat, 30, 40 people. I think there's a lot of benefits to it that people don't see because they're not on a balance sheet necessarily. And I think they also require a longer term view of things rather than the next fiscal quarter.
It's scary to be the first person to do something, and she was the first one to go out and do it in New York. And she's committed to it, even when other people around her are starting to fall away from it. It's a pretty hard switch to make, and if you have a stable restaurant, you're really rocking the boat, and sort of describe it as you're tipping the boat this way. And it takes, I think, a real year to sort of make it level out again, to get that boat stable. And I feel most people switched, and within 3 to 6 months, we had this a ton of restaurants, and then they all slowly started switching back. Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes months and months, and I always think, it's like a full year. You have to cycle through all the seasons before you can see the change starting to make a big difference.
For restaurants that have already gone tip-free, I think that they have seen benefits from adopting that system. At the same time, restaurateurs have been very, I think, upfront that it's not a cost-saving measure by any stretch. And in fact, because of the way that some tax requirements work, it can even end up costing restaurants money.
I often think I've made the wrong decision by going tipless. I think I could make more money. I think probably my servers could make a little bit more money. I don't know what I would do about my back of house because I'm not quite sure how I would pay them. But when I look at my bank account, I'm like, oh, I probably actually could have more money in this bank account. But I know I didn't make the wrong decision. Deep down, it was definitely the right one for us.
It seems to me that more restaurants in New York City that initially adopted tip-free have reverted to tipping versus in the Bay Area, there seem to be more, let's say, hangers-on. But here in the Bay Area, more restaurants tend to use mandatory surcharges as opposed to service-inclusive pricing. That may be, at least in some cases, a response to or an attempt to ameliorate sticker shock.
There was a lot of talk amongst a lot of restaurants, and there were a lot of different ideas and models thrown out. I think it was a time for restaurants to kind of get creative and say, what are the different options here? How can we absorb these costs and make sure that we're open to employ these people in 6 months? Because that was the ultimate fear of what was happening, was that we were afraid that we wouldn't even be here to pay these people anything. Well, option one was service charge. Service charge allowed the servers to get guaranteed tips without any kind of prejudice from the guests.
Service charges, that's somewhat common, especially in higher-end restaurants where people are, paying a lot of money. They sort of just include this extra cost. It supposedly allows you the ability to more legally distribute that money how you will, but part of Measure FF, a bylaw, was verbiage surrounding service charges and how that money can and cannot be distributed, which sort of negated the whole idea. It's like, doesn't even work because of the law.
Some states have stricter legislation about what a service charge is. Other states are more lenient about it. But the truth of it is, it's changing every day. I mean, you look at Seattle, there are service charge laws that are changing right now as we speak. And businesses aren't quite sure how it's all going to pan out and how they're going to handle it.
I've heard so many people, complaining about these additional service charges. Oh, well, I wouldn't pay a 20% tip. Why do I have to pay a 20% service charge? It's just like an extra cost. We're already paying sales tax. I think just charge what you're going to charge. If you're already going to do 20% regardless, then just charge 20% more and call it a day.
So what would it look like if we just took that 20%, folded it into the price of the dish, paid everybody a fixed hourly rate? How would that affect the industry? Well, if you were tipping on 20% prior to the increase in wages, then you didn't see a price increase as a customer. That sounds like a win-win to me. The business is a risk. The business has to fund all of this. But by raising the prices, we're able to drive more revenue for the business to have the ability to disperse it in a fair and equitable way. The managers are able to be compensated out of the higher prices of food. The servers are able to be compensated at higher rates out of the price of the food, and the kitchen is able to be compensated at higher rates out of the price of the food. So we ultimately decided to go with the full inclusive tip, no added fees or charges, and there were a handful of other restaurants that did it too.
I would say the overarching response was positive, but not like wildly so. I think most people didn't notice, didn't care, or they got their check and they're like, where do I put the tip? Oh, what? Oh, okay, that's interesting, cool. And then a handful of negative responses, but not that many actually.
Very few people are upset. Some are, but very few. Most people have kind of a skeptical viewpoint and want to challenge the ideals with me. And at the end of that, most people, almost all of them, will walk away at least with a better understanding because they've listened, and most of them will actually agree with me. 99% of the time, they make money the way that we pay people, period. And then they go, wait a minute, why am I so against this model when this is how I get paid for the living that I create and do? It's actually not that bad of a deal.
I think that I was pretty much the only front of house employee that stayed on through the transition. The disparity of pay was a thing that all servers know about. It's not like we're unaware. And it was the first time that I was faced with the fact that this disparity could be fixed and it would require sacrifice. I think for people who worked there longer as servers and kind of got into this expectation of what it meant to work at Homestead, it would probably be harder to kind of make that switch, because in some ways it did feel like a pay cut.
I started working here after the restaurant went tip-free. That's actually part of the reason I was interested in working here. I just wanted to see how it worked. I like it a lot. I know I probably could be making more money other places, but I wouldn't trade that for, you know, just a friendly and stable work environment like this. I think that's much more important.
Once we went through the transition, things became so much cleaner and easier to manage from just the accounting side. But further, we have a greater control over our business as a whole. The money comes in, we have it budgeted a certain way, we have a greater connection with all of our employees. There's a lot more camaraderie. And I really do think it is the tip-free model, because being a server who is tipped, you're sort of operating your own mini business, your own personal business each day with each interaction with your customers. This new mindset is sort of like the restaurant operates as a whole and you're in it for the whole restaurant, not just for yourself in that moment.
It has gotten us all together. We can jump in from section to section, help each other, and we don't have to, you know, fight for the good tippers or my regulars, the one that leave me good money. All of that is out of the window here.
I think that we just help each other out more, because we're not out to, you know, take home a certain amount of money from a customer. We're out to kind of just get through the night, help each other out, make sure everybody else is doing okay.
I've watched these servers here work really hard to please the table, to make sure they're enjoying, they're having a good time, and they're not really getting any tips. So I guess it depends on the server.
Nobody here wants people to make less. Everybody wants people to make more, period. Whether it's tipping or not tipping, the goal is still the same. I think the law as a whole had a negative impact financially on us. And the way in which we responded to that was able to neutralize that negative financial impact, while still getting the benefits of the social impact it was designed to put in place.
So we saw a dip in our sales, but we also saw a rash of restaurants closing in that same year. So the fact that we stayed open is positive. And since that time, while we saw a dip, we've seen an increase in both sales and cover counts, which is customers coming in. So again, I'm not sure if it's directly related to us being a tip-free restaurant, or if it's the effect of this and other issues on the economic climate in Oakland.
Making this initial change had its challenges. Mostly, it was fear. Fear within myself and my wife as being business owners, branching out on this thing that is an idea that we don't really know would work in practice. But through consistency and application, communication, transparency with both the staff and the guests alike, we were able to make that transition. Our price is our price. It's transparent from the very beginning. And if it's too expensive and somebody doesn't want to pay for it, that's okay. It's not personal. It's the cost of what it takes for us to take care of our staff.
We've tracked about 300 restaurant companies that we've talked to that have made some transition either to a one wage and tips on top model, or a service charge model, or a gratuity free model. Our research shows that the most important thing is not which of these models people choose, but that tips are not counted as a portion of base wage in any context.
We feel like we're interpreting this measure with integrity and honesty, transparency and communication to everybody. And if the business fails, then it fails, but at least I know that I'm doing the right thing.
When I started out in this industry, having like a year where you had like 20% profit, that was pretty that's a good year, but it wasn't extraordinary. And then as time went on and minimum wage started going up a little, we went down to 15 and then 10, and most restaurants' profits are down to like 2 or 3%, which is a huge difference. But when it was 15% and minimum wage was really low, we were all sort of like taking advantage of that. And we asked for minimum wage not to be raised. And now, because it has to, it's being raised, everybody's taking it as a punishment, whereas I sort of see it as our just reward for trying to keep minimum wage down for so long and underpaying generations of cooks.
As of now, the minimum wage is tied to inflation. So annually, we are dealing with this increase. Every January 1st, minimum wage rises again. And if a restaurant is paying everybody at minimum wage, they're going to annually see increased prices. There isn't a long-term solution for this. You're going to see restaurants trying to find creative ways to divert it. We chose to just embrace it. We chose to go tip-free. I think that the more restaurants that do this and do this successfully, it'll garner more and more of a following. But the reality for me is the tipping model, it's dying.
The tipless model, I think, should be the wave of the future. Do I think that it will? Maybe over time. But at this juncture, I don't see a lot of people jumping on board.
I don't know if tip-free is moving forward or not. I've definitely seen more and more restaurants that are tip-free.
I think it's a good social experiment to see how certain places go, see how it pans out, maybe make some edits and see where it lives in different markets. I don't believe that every single company, it's a good idea to change over wholesale 100% the industry to a tipless system.
I don't have that much faith in it anymore. So many people jumped on the bandwagon and so many people jumped off. I don't know what would sort of resurrect it again. I'm certainly not giving up yet. There's a couple of big restaurants that aren't giving up. This is how I figured I could make my restaurant sustainable, and hopefully other people would also join in. And they didn't. And the bigger worry is, how do we make this industry sustainable, because we're not.
So those that have gone to tip-free and have already made that jump, I have a sense of gratitude. They're kind of forging a new path, they're taking a big risk, and we as independents, we're all watching to see what the fallout's gonna be, what works, what doesn't work. We're asking questions, we're talking about what it is they're doing, how many adjustments they've had to make. So those that have taken the jump first, we're watching very closely.
When I started this film, I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't realize how controversial minimum wage really was and how tricky the whole tipping system was for most people. We've been operating for how many years on this tipping system, and I think there's something broken to it. Yeah, tip-free sucks for people like me who work in restaurants to supplement their income, to chase their dreams and doing something else. But it shouldn't be about me. It should be about the people who are trying to make a living doing that and making it a career path.
If I didn't work at Homestead, I wouldn't have cared about Measure FF. Like, it just wouldn't have been something that bothered me. Like, I wouldn't have thought about it. But I had to sit and watch a business who was directly affected by it and just kind of marinate in my own choices. I don't want to just support something that I think is going to help the lowest paid worker. I want to actually support something that's practically going to do so. And the more that I learn about minimum wage, the less I'm convinced it helps the way we think it does, which is hard because I think a lot of times those laws and those movements are well-intended. At the end of the day, like, small businesses are the best thing for communities.
And if we're making it harder for small businesses, we're doing something wrong. I feel like this issue's so complicated, I don't want to come down on one side or the other, because I'm a filmmaker, I'm not an economist, I'm not a restaurant owner. I don't have the answers. I think what I really want is to have a conversation, and the people who are taking the lead on the tip-free movement are trying to do that. They're going out on a limb talking about something that's really controversial, and it's a risk to go out and put their faces on something that is bigger than them. So I hope that whatever you feel leaving this film, you at least know that it shouldn't be taken out on these businesses because they're not the problem. In fact, I think a lot of what they're doing is a big part of the solution.